So good day, friends. This is Dr. Bob Hamilton, and you have tuned into the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. So before we get going here, I want to say a couple comments. Number one, the fact that you have tuned in today means a lot to me. I know you are all moms and dads and grandma and grandpas, and you're busy shuttling kids around this community. So the fact that you're here doing what you're listening in on this conversation means a lot to me. So thank you for being here. If you like what you hear, and I hope you do, I'd appreciate it if you would send it out to friends and family. We're building an audience, and we're building an audience for the people that I bring on this show. And this week is a great pleasure to welcome a friend. Her name is Tracy Zaslow. She's a pediatric sports medicine physician. She's the director of the pediatric sports medicine area of Cedars-Sinai Kurlan Jobe Institute. This is in Los Angeles. And so Tracy Zaslow, thank you for coming on the Hamilton Review.
Thanks so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
So I don't usually have people on my show more than one time. Tracy, I think this is at least your second time on my show. And you're here because you are a very important cog in the wheel in terms of medical care for kids. And it turns out, friends, I refer a lot of patients to Tracy because there are a lot of our kids in this community are involved in sports one way or the other. And Tracy is my go-to person when I can't figure out what their problem is, or they need more help than I can give them, put it that way. So Tracy's a very important person to me. But before we get into the conversation, we're going to talk a little bit about summer sports and what kind of things you can do to avoid injury and just kind of go into that whole thing because summer's upon us. Tracy, I'd like to have my guest introduce himself. So if you would be kind enough to kind of go back into your story, your journey, and tell us how you ended up doing what you're doing today.
Yes. Well, thanks again for having me back. It's an honor. My story goes back. I trained in general pediatrics first and love working with kids and knew I wanted to do that the whole way through. But along the way, discovered sports medicine. In my third year of residency, learned that there was such a field as primary care sports medicine. And I realized it was a perfect fit for me. Gave me the opportunity to help patients be as active as they can, get back to play. I'm someone who likes activity. I've never been a superstar athlete, but have played sports throughout high school, intramurals in college, and then have remained active. And so I really feel like I get my patient's desire to kind of get back to play when there's been an injury. And so I've been really lucky to have this career where I get to support young athletes to do that and to be their very best.
You are in a great career because you're really dealing with kids in a beautiful time in their life where they're in high school, college, junior high, whatever, and they're out there, they're doing things, and most of the kids that you see are athletes um, in one way or the other. And there's a lot of forms of athletics. We'll get into that in a minute, but I want to back up a little bit before we get into this and kind of back you down into your journey. First of all, why did you want to become a doctor, and why did you want to become a pediatrician?
So that goes way back actually. I was probably 11 or 12 when I remember saying to my mom that I wanted to be a doctor. I think that's when I outgrew my desire to be one of the CHP officers, California Highway Patrol, from the TV show that I watched, Chips, or the EMT again, from a TV show Emergency. So I've always just really enjoyed the kind of mixture of being able to help people and make a difference, as well as the science behind it, and kind of merging those two components. And so I was doing everything I could along the way to shadow different doctors and do the program through Los Angeles Pediatric Gene Black program as a summer program that I did as a high school student that's still around today through the Los Angeles Pediatric Society, and that I love hosting students at this kind of stage. So I feel like life has come full circle. But In pediatrics, I think I did consider some of the other fields of family medicine, internal medicine, but I really loved working with kids. And I know some people will say, "Oh, the parents with pediatrics are so tough." And for me, I don't find it. I enjoy the concern that parents present, and I understand that. And so it really is a pleasure to be able to help kids and their families really be able to set them on a great path for a healthy, long, active life ahead, and give their parents the tools to understand how they can support their child to achieve those goals.
So I love the fact. So you were watching Chips and you wanted to be a California highway patrolman, and as you were watching ER, the problem is that they don't have a television show about pediatricians. I guess we're not that dynamic or something. I think there'd be more people going into the pediatric world if there was a good TV show about pediatricians. So maybe
Yep.
somebody out there needs to work on that. I do want you did say something very important, very very dear to my heart, which is the Even Gene Black pediatric internship program through the LA Pediatric Society. You know that for many many years I headed up that program, and
Yes.
that is a program which is very near and dear to my heart because it does allow young kids between 11th and 12th grade to really shadow local doctors. And I typically, in the month of July, those patients who are listening know that I have a bunch of kids in my office during the month of July, and
Yep.
it's wonderful. I really think that we need to continue these programs. And the pandemic kind of messed up things for a while. We had to do it via Zoom, but we're back in person now, thank goodness. And
Yep.
I do love that program, and I didn't realize that you had done that program.
Yeah, no, and it was, pivotal for me. It was, the first opportunity I could really, other than being a volunteer in the hospital, it was the first opportunity to really get to see medicine. And my most influential day, I remember I was in the emergency room in the morning, and someone came in with abdominal pain, a young woman, and then I got to follow her from the emergency room to radiology, where they did an ultrasound, and they found that she had an ectopic pregnancy, so a pregnancy that was not in the uterus, it wasn't in the right spot, and could be life threatening for her. And from the medical side, I was then able to follow her to the OR, where she had a procedure to really save her life and her future fertility as well. And so I got to be through each of those steps. And the hard part, watching her, have to deal with the emotions going with all that. But as a 16, 17-year-old student, it was such a unique opportunity that really taught me so much in so many levels.
Yeah.
So I think the program that I was able to do that, and I know now there's more challenges with getting people in ORs and things like that, and as I've dealt with it on the administrative side. But I think it's such a great opportunity, and so I'm always supportive of the LAP Society and the Gene Black program, because I want kids to be able to keep having those opportunities.
Yeah. No, well, I'll tell you what. I mean, what you just shared is obviously would make a gigantic impression on a young, teenage person, girl or boy. And that is exactly why this program is there, is to allow kids, young kids, to really get a flavor for what medicine is all about. So you were, I hear so many of those kind of stories of just moments where kids see things, babies being born, for example, which is a
Yep.
profound, amazing
Yeah.
miracle, and so that does impact them in a big way. Okay, well, very good. So you ended up going into pediatrics. You like kids. The parents, I like both. I like the kids and I like the parents. I find that dealing with young people who just had children, they're in a great place in their life. This is a very wonderful moment of kind of a flowering of their lives in so many ways. It's fun to actually walk them through those years with their young children. So you went into pediatric sports, and this is your world now. So we're heading into summer, and I want to kind of talk a little bit about the conference. What we want to get to today, and that is summertime. In my mind, means the people are getting out of school, they're getting out of buildings. The weather has changed is sunny, is the water in the ocean here in California and all through the country is getting warmer. You can jump in pools and lakes and streams and oceans, and it's a time of fun. When I was a kid, I remember loving summer. I literally counted down the days before school was out. Did you do that, Tracy?
Absolutely, yeah, that's kind of
Yeah.
the carefree days of summer that you just got to kind of enjoy being
Yeah.
outside. Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. And I still actually, it turns out, even though I am working and I still have that kind of giddy feeling in my heart about the wonderful days of summer. I mean,
Yep.
even though I don't get to hang out all day and get bored, I don't get bored very much anymore, but I did when I was a kid. Anyway, but in addition to that, people are out there doing things, and I don't know. I mean, there are so many things that people do. They're out hiking, they're biking, they're surfing, they're body surfing, they're swimming, they're playing baseball, all sorts of things. Um, Tell us a little bit about, in terms of your thinking about this topic, um, and the things that just kind of recommendations that you would make in terms of, to people who are going to be, whose kids are going to be engaging in these things, just things that you kind of think about, have parents think about, because you're talking to parents and grandparents right now, and maybe pitfalls that they can avoid.
Yeah, so I guess I feel like I'm a pediatrician at heart, so it's all about prevention. So the first kind of area I would hit would be water safety. Is just you are near bodies of water, as you mentioned, and so just making sure that kids have good adult supervision. Getting them the swimming training on the early side so that they can be water safe, but even as water safe, I still young kids still need a lot of supervision, and so I think that's number one, two, and three. Then another area is helmets. So we see a lot of injuries. So my practice, it's a mixture of musculoskeletal injuries and concussions, and um, so helmets. I always say if you've got wheels under your feet, you need a helmet on your head. So that's scooter, skateboard, bike, rollerblades. And one of the things we're seeing a ton of is kids getting on these motorized scooters and bikes. So yeah, I think the e-bikes are awesome for your older adult that might not be able to otherwise bike up that hill, and it really opens a lot of doors. Kids really shouldn't be on these bikes and scooters that are motorized and can go fast. If they are, definitely having all the safety gear that you'd give for a motorcycle. Honestly, we had a kid a few weeks ago that kind of got on the scooter and was barely on it for a few minutes, hit a bump, flew off, and broke both arms, and so had to be in casts and kind of out of their sports and activities, and luckily didn't sustain a head injury, but we've seen a number that are head injuries. They just kind of get a little more speed than they were accustomed to. So number one, kind of staying away from those motorized. I know they're fun and they look really cool, but really kids don't belong on those. And then number two is making sure to have a helmet on at all times. So helmet's not going to prevent all concussion type injuries, but it will absolutely decrease the rate of injury for a skull fracture, for bleeding in the brain. And so, even on a bicycle, a scooter, a skateboard, rollerblades that doesn't have a motor, so important for the kids to have a helmet.
No, just commenting on scooters. I actually ride my bike around the community a lot, and these guys who are on these motorized bicycles, these electric bicycles, they're flying down the road. I mean, they're
Mhm.
going 20, 25 miles an hour. Now, mind you,
Yep.
that's a pretty, even though in a car that's not too fast, when you're out there without the protection of a vehicle around you, you hit a bump and you start flying. That's serious.
Yep.
And I'm actually kind of surprised that some of these electric bikes are allowed to ride on bike paths and things like that, because when they go by me, they're going by fast, and they're
Yeah.
almost like a danger. They're a threat to, old fashioned bike riders who kind of pedal around
Yep.
because they're zipping along. Now, mind you, I've been on these motorized bikes. They're fabulous. They're really,
Yep.
really fun to be on.
Absolutely.
And I get the attraction because they really are cool. And these scooters that the kids ride are likewise. They look like a lot of fun. Now, mind you, I also drive cars, and these guys sometimes zip in and out of traffic, and I kind of go, "Oh my gosh,
Hmm.
they're
Yeah.
completely unprotected." So, in addition to falling off of them, hitting a bump and falling off, they can also be hit by cars. And I'm sure you've seen that.
Yes. Yep. And it's unfortunate. I mean, and with distracted driving being an issue as well. I mean, we've seen a lot of significant injuries. Obviously, when it's worse. Obviously, when they're hit by a car versus just falling off the bike. But really trying to have kids be aware. If kids even are on a regular bicycle riding on the road, not having earphones in is really important. I know everyone loves their earbuds. I've got mine in now. But not to be on a road where cars, you need to be able to be alert and aware and to hear what's around you. So kind of
Yeah.
that's not the time to pop the earbuds in. Um, so they got to
So
listen to
that
your podcast at another time. So
Yeah, no, my podcast. Yeah, they can ride their bikes and listen to my podcast. Yes, I agree. No, even that is not allowed. Here's the thing, it's amazing because I do ride bikes, and you do need to hear the road. And if you have your music playing and listen, there's nothing more wonderful than to be, riding along a beautiful area. And by the way, if you're on a bike trail where it's very protected, well, yeah, I don't think there's any problem with that. But if you're on
agreed,
the
agreed.
actual street and you're going through the communities, you got to listen, and you got to be listening carefully. In today's world, as you well know, there are a lot of electric vehicles like Teslas
Yep,
and other a lot of electric vehicles. They don't make much noise. They're
yep,
really quiet, and so they can
yep,
come behind you. And if you're not listening, obviously you can hear them coming because of the tires on the road. But they don't. They're not making motor. There's no motor noise to these
yep,
vehicles, and they can be zipping along, and you can completely be caught unaware. So I want to reinforce that idea that you got to take the earbuds out for sure if you're going to be on a
yep,
scooter or whatever, definitely in traffic.
yep.
I want to kind of go back to one thing you said about concussions. This is a big issue that comes up a lot. Can you just kind of speak a little bit to concussions, maybe? Because I get a lot of phone calls about kids hitting something, falling down, and how do you know when a kid has had a concussion?
Yeah, so it's kind of an easy and a hard question. So the definition of concussion is having any sort of head trauma, so either hitting the head or a quick movement of the head, and then developing any of the symptoms of concussion. So that symptom list is very long. It's headache, nausea, vomiting, dizziness, feeling out of it, feeling sleepy, having trouble concentrating or focusing. All of those are symptoms. So if they fall and they hit their head and all they have is a headache in the area that they hit, like that they got a bump on their head and that's the one spot that hurts, but everything else is normal. They're not having any other issue, then sure, that may just be a bump on the head. But if they have the bump on the head and more of a headache that's kind of diffuse, or they're feeling a little nauseous, or they're feeling like their vision is blurry, then that would be more indicative that it's a concussion. And kind of the mantra within the concussion world is if in doubt, sit out. So, meaning if you think it might have been a concussion, then not having them return to play in the moment and then getting them checked out, bringing them into their pediatrician, and then kind of letting the pediatrician determine diagnosis and if they need further evaluation or management.
So when kids fall down and lose consciousness, that would be, in my mind, another big indication that they've had a concussion.
Yes, absolutely. So concussions, you can get a concussion without loss of consciousness. Only 10% of those who have a concussion do lose consciousness. But if you have a loss of consciousness, then absolutely you've made your diagnosis of concussion. And if it's just a few seconds,
Mhm.
then further evaluation by your pediatrician, a call into the pediatrician would be appropriate. But if it's a prolonged loss of consciousness, more than 30 seconds or so, they probably should be seen more urgently, potentially in an emergency room to make sure that there's nothing more serious going on.
Yeah. Okay. Very important point. So going back even a little bit, you made a comment about water safety. This is a big issue in my office, and I of all the things I tell parents to do is I tell parents to teach their children how to swim, or at least become water safe. And there's a difference. Water safe simply means that you teach a child how to float,
Yes.
usually on their back. When do you have any recommendations about when you begin putting kids in water, swimming lessons or water safety lessons?
I feel like the recommendations have kind of been all across the board in the sense, and they've changed to move earlier from. I think overall, there used to be some thought
Mm.
that you don't want to put them in the water as an infant or what have you, because then they're going to be comfortable with the water. But I guess my personal feeling is that I think exposure to the water safety in the sense of being able to get to a float position can be done, as early as they can cooperate with that. And then the swimming lessons, really probably around 2 is when they can truly have the coordination to start swimming. And it may not be till 3 or 4 that they truly get it. Um, but I think exposing them to that is really, really important. But each time the child is exposed to the water, I think as much fun as water is, the kids need to be reminded this is never to be done alone. And I always am concerned. I know everybody loves their floaties, and they can put the kid in the water with the floaties and kind of maybe have a little more distance and the comfort as a parent. But I really, I'm not a huge fan of them. I think it makes the kids feel more confident in the water than they are. And so I think, if they can't swim on their own, then they should be in the water arm's distance from a parent, and until they can swim, confidently on their own.
Yeah.
I don't know if
No,
that's in
I
line with what you advise too. So,
no, I think that floaties are one of these things that I talk about a lot in the office, and I have the same kind of concern about that because there's a familiarity that children develop with these on, and if you're not looking, they jump in the water with the floaties, and they have listen. There's nothing more wonderful than a pool for a kid. I remember as a young kid going on vacation. My only criterion that we told our parents we needed to have a swimming pool to swim in. That was I didn't care where
yeah,
we were at. We could be at a Motel 6. We could be anywhere where we needed water to get into. That was part of the vacation, right? Is was it
absolutely, absolutely.
absolutely. So, but when you have this familiarity with water, and wrongly so, when you have floaties on, these kids kind of think they can float, okay, and then their floaties are taken off, and then they decide to jump in the pool, and it's different when you don't have your floaties on, right? So that's
Yep,
concerning. The other thing too is I just my general rule about being, swimming, no one should swim alone. No one should. I
correct.
don't think anyone. I don't care if you're an adult or you're an expert swimmer. There should be somebody around you because things happen in the water. And I get when I see people swimming alone. I always get anxious about that. I know maybe that's a weird fear, but I do. So
No,
uh,
I think
your
it's
point is
valid.
well taken.
Yeah, I mean, there was a story of a water polo player who had an underlying seizure disorder that was well managed. But it's thanks to his teammates that he's still here because he had a seizure during a game. And his teammates really quickly noticed he was not in his position and pulled him out of the water, almost immediately. But had they not been so astute to notice their
Yeah.
teammate was not there, or if he was swimming alone, the outcome would have been, much different. So I totally agree with your point. It's really important to be swimming with a buddy.
So, other than okay, so water safety is important. Helmets are important. Looking out for these scooters and bikes. What other things? I mean, when you think about, I think about these kids who are playing little league baseball.
Yep.
Your thoughts about? I mean, little league elbow and overuse injury is something that you deal with, I'm sure, all the time.
Yes.
Also, these girls who were playing volleyball, these jumper knees and things like that. Tell us a little bit about entheses and tendon issues, because you deal with these on a day-by-day basis.
Yes. So, people used to say kids don't get overuse injuries, but that's absolutely not true. We see a lot of them. And, I think the thought used to be, well, summer is, free play. There's not as much intensity. And so you won't see overuse injuries then. But that's not what happens in the sense that for baseball, summer is almost the prime season. That's when you really get to playoffs, World Series, and Little League. And so it's the most intense training and competition that happens. Additionally, in other sports, you mentioned volleyball, gymnastics as well. Gymnastics isn't a summer sport. The competition season is January to May, but their intense training is when you don't have school and you can go to the gym for 8 hours. Similarly with dance, there's all sorts of dance intensives where students will travel all over the country to go to a really high level intensive training, and they'll be dancing, 5 to 8 to 10 hours a day. So we absolutely see overuse injuries, and so as you mentioned, the entheses. So what that's referring to is growth plates where tendons attach. So they're not the growth plates where you get longer from, but they're growth plates where you have tendons attached, and you have them all over the body. So we see a lot at the elbow, which gives you that little league elbow. Oftentimes that's from throwing too many pitches too hard, or getting some more of the complex pitches like a slider or a curve that's going to put extra stress on the inside part of the elbow. And in adults, our weak link would be a ligament injury, but in kids, their weak link is these growth plates, or apophyses, as we call these, where the tendon attaches. And so if we ignore that, then they can really kind of get into some issues. So we really want to listen when they have pain at the elbow. Or you also mentioned jumper's knee, can happen in volleyball players. We see it in gymnasts. We see it in any sort of running sport. And what that is, jumper's knee refers specifically to the patellar tendon, the tendon that connects the patella to the tibia bone. But we'll also see a growth plate issue at the knee, which is called Osgood-Schlatter, after the two doctors, Dr. Osgood and Dr. Schlatter, who noticed that we have a growth plate in that spot as we grow. But if they have kind of pain and a bump right at the bottom of the knee, that would be concerning for Osgood-Schlatter, or this apophysitis, irritation of the growth plate that's happening there. And we can get into a little more, but there's a lot we can do. One, to prevent these injuries, and then number two, to treat them when they happen.
Do you have any thoughts about how many pitches a little league pitcher should be pitching?
There's specific guidelines that are based on age, and so I'm happy to kind of send you my reference if you want to share that with your listeners. But it's very specific based on age, and then how many. So then, how many pitches you throw at each game, and then how many days you need off. So once you've thrown more than about 20 pitches, you need at least a day off of throwing. And so I think that's one of those things to really consider. The way sports are structured these days, it's that kids are going to multiple games within a weekend, and for something like pitching, which is really traumatic to the elbow, and we really do need to look at the number of pitches thrown, as well as catchers. So catchers are throwing as many times, and often close to as hard as the pitcher. So we also want to make sure that they're kind of considered in how many throws, and they should probably be kind of subbed in and out as almost like a team. The catcher shouldn't be doing the whole game, and the pitcher is only doing parts of the game.
Interesting. I don't really think about the catchers. I think about the pitchers, so they're throwing harder. They are. I will tell you, having a grandson in the little league world, the coaches are very keyed into this these days, and they're counting pitches, and they're counting. They're watching this in I think in a way that is very different than, say, when I was a kid, which I think is wonderful. And so that's something we need to be mindful of. But you're right. There are a lot of kids who are playing club teams, club, and they're playing a lot. They're playing all the time, and it's really
And
important that these kids don't overdo it in a way.
and
I'm
the
watching our
challenge,
time
I'd
here.
say,
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. One little point I'd put in there real
Yes.
quick is just that oftentimes coaches are really good at watching it, but the challenge is they're playing on multiple teams at the same time. So coach from team A may be counting those pitches, and coach from team B may be counting the pitches, but they're not adding them all up together. So as a
Uh,
parent who knows exactly how many teams your child is playing on, it's really important to advocate for your kid and make sure they're not getting too many throws.
yes, indeed. And I'm not, I have to say, I'm not a super duper big fan of kids playing on multiple teams at one time. I really,
Yep.
sorry, parents who are listening. I think that, focus on the team you like the best or is the best for them and focus on that one rather than playing school team and a club team. And I mean, this can
Yeah.
go really, these kids can be, there could be a full-time job. Okay, I'm watching our time here and we're going to finish up in a second. I want to, one thing, hiking is one of the things that a lot of kids do during this time. I had a kid in the office yesterday. He's about ready to take off on a Boy Scouts hike, and walk about 20 miles, something, I think, over a period of 3 or 4 days. um, your thoughts about hiking, and also how much weight should these kids be carrying on their back?
So good questions. We don't have specific data to answer those questions, but I think some general guidelines. Number one is for the hiking is great. I love it. I think it's a great combination of physical activity and in that nature feel that I think is so important for all of us, especially living in a big city. And so then the big key here is to train for it. So if you know you've got that 20-mile hike ahead of you, that shouldn't be the first hike that you're doing. You want to start with hikes, 2, 3 miles, and start putting extra weight on as you go. So I know in my daughter's Scouts troop, they started hiking where they did 2 miles with two full water bottles in their bag, not necessarily to drink the water, but to feel that weight. The next week, it was 3 to 4 miles with 4 bottles in the bag. Then we go, kind of from there up. And so, really doing stepwise. If you've got your goal of how long that hike is going to be, you want to work towards that over, a number of months, depending on how far you're getting. And then for the weight, there isn't an exact weight that is determined. It's really about how much they can carry in a safe way, meaning that they're able to use the correct posture to hold that weight, that the backpack fits them appropriately, and again that they've built up. So adding weight over a number of months through the hikes is really important. And then even strengthening programs, so cross training, meaning maybe they should be doing some core strengthening program to get those abs, lower back, and buttock muscles really
Yeah.
strong, because we need that to hold the right posture as they're going through the hike.
Yeah. I think one last thing is that you also have to have the appropriate equipment. So you should have good
Yes.
shoes, and if you're going through brush, you should have protection for your legs. One quick story was I had a young girl who went on a hike in the Santa Barbara area in her sandals, in her thongs, and if you're gonna walk around, if you walk around the hotel club, okay, around the pool,
Yeah.
you can wear
Yeah.
thongs, okay. If you're gonna go on a hike in the mountains, no, don't wear
Uh,
thongs. um, the problem with this gal is that she was very exposed, and she got bit by a snake, and that was a tough time for her. She was got really sick. So if she would have had nice little camping, or hiking boots on, that snake that bit her probably wouldn't have got her where it got her, and or would have bit her foot, her shoe, not her foot. So you got to think about making when you're going to be doing any event, you should have the appropriate equipment, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly. And even for the hiking shoe, you don't want to have your first hike, in the new shoes to be that 20-mile hike. They should be part of your training program in the sense of really breaking them in, being ready for blisters and things like that too. So absolutely the right gear and sun protection as well. Lightweight, long sleeve, long pants is really important for protecting his sun against insects, and the brush as well.
Yes, indeed. Well, listen, Tracy, you have been a wealth of information as you always are. So thank you for taking the time to come on the Hamilton Review. I'm watching our time, and I know you got to go. And so thank you for being here and today.
Thanks so much for having me. Such a nice chance to chat with you.
And friends, those listening, thank you guys for coming on and listening to the Hamilton Review today. It's a pleasure to have you all here. Until next time, be well. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of your day. Tune in again next week on Apple Podcast. Rate and comment and tell a friend.